Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Friday Live on this Friday, the 2nd of August. I can see someone's been here waiting for me. Yes, I did have I just couldn't get my this mic to connect. So, and the sound quality is really important. So anyway, I've got it working now, but yes, it just wouldn't talk to my computer. So thank you for waiting for me. I do appreciate it, and sorry to keep anybody else who's been waiting. Where are we? We are Friday, August the 2nd. So our first Friday live for August. I can't believe how fast this year is going. It's nuts how fast. I cannot believe we're in August. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Melbourne. Very cold, but the sun is shining and the weather is glorious. So that's exciting because we've gone through a really intense cold snap, and it's just so nice to see the blue sky. I don't know what it does. It just kind of lifts the soul, doesn't it? So wherever you are, I hope that you are having a great day or evening. And for those of you who are new to me, some of you I know have purchased my ebook recently, or my relationship diagnostic tool, which I've just launched, helping you kind of diagnose where things are going in your relationship. So some of you have been brought here that way. And so I just want to wish you a warm welcome. These Friday Lives are really set up to answer any questions that you have and to really expand on any questions that you might have about the ebook and some of the concepts or the understanding that I'm pointing to in that book. So please feel free to let me know where you're listening from and to say hi. I love to know where people are. I just love the magic of the internet and that we can all be, even though we're in different time zones around the world, we can be here at the same time having this conversation. I just find that amazing. So feel free to say hi and let me know where you're from. And if you have a question, post it in the comments below, and I will make sure I answer it. If you show up live, your question will get answered. I also have a number of questions that have been sent in to me. I will do my best to get as many of those answered today, but please just understand, if you have sent me a question, I answer them in order of receiving them. And I may not be able to get to yours today, but it will go to the top of the list next Friday if I don't get there today. Hello, thank you for saying hi. Hi, Susan. I know you are in Florida, Susan, and it's beautiful and warm there. I can imagine this time of year, Florida would be pretty humid and hot, right? But it would be gorgeous. And Michelle, you're in Bow Desert. Well, I also know Bow Desert's up north in Queensland, and that's a really warm part of the world right now. So everyone's obviously in a warmer part of the world than I am. That's okay. That's okay. Winter is meant to be chilly, cold, all of those sorts of things. And I also know it's temporary. And I know that the seasons are changing. The days are getting longer. And there's more light at the end of the day. And the days are getting lighter in the morning. Change is afoot. Now, why do you think I'm even talking about that? What is the weather? And I do talk about the weather a lot. Why do you think I talk about the weather? I don't just say this for the sake of it. There's always a reason generally why I say something, and I link it back to some of the things that I'm talking about. 4 degrees there. Oh my goodness, Jane. 4 degrees in Methven. Woof. Lots of snow on the mountains. Well, I'm sure it's beautiful. Great skiing there. That'd be very, very accurate. It's very humid and hot. I can imagine, Susan. Okay, because life isn't stagnant. Yes, thank you for that response to my question. Why do I talk about the weather? And yes, it is because life isn't stagnant, but it's also because the weather is very similar to the nature of a human being. And when you understand that, it becomes a lot easier to navigate our emotions. It becomes a lot easier to navigate issues, problems, difficulties that we're facing, okay? Because the nature of a human being is very, very, very similar to the weather. And I think one is a great metaphor for the other. And I think the metaphor, if you think about the weather, how extreme the weather can be, can't it? The weather can be very extreme. It can be really, really, really hot. It can be really, really, really cold. You can have intense winds. You can have hail. You can have everything in between, intense humidity as Susan is experiencing in Florida. So, there are extremes to the weather. And we accept this because we know that's the way the weather works. right? We understand that that's a natural part of the weather. And definitely there are times where we don't enjoy the weather being the way it is. And there's definitely moments where I've been a bit over the cold here and the rain and the shorter days and all of those things, okay? But I also know that that is just the nature of the weather. And there's nothing I can do about that, right? So when I understand the way something works, I tend to work with it rather than against it. And I just think the weather and the extremes with which the weather goes to is very, very similar to the extremes of a human being. Human beings can go to emotional extremes, right? Everybody does. This is one of those truths about people, okay? We can all go to these emotional extremes, emotional highs, emotional lows, and everything in between. But I think what I find so interesting is that we're kind of constantly surprised by this. We kind of constantly feel like we're not meant to be having the experience we're having, right? We kind of think like there's something wrong with that. But we don't do that with the weather so much. Now I know there's lots of, some of you are going to come back and go, what about global warming and what about this? I'm not talking about all that stuff, right? Some of you are going to have your yeah buts. But in general, the weather is predictably unpredictable. Okay? Predictably unpredictable. And this is true of human beings. Okay? This is true of human beings. Yet when a human being has a predictably unpredictable experience, we either blame ourselves, make ourselves wrong, are shocked and surprised, see this as some issue, or we apply that to somebody else. There's something wrong with that person. There's something wrong with this. There's something wrong there, right? Now, I understand that there are people who are abusive and all of those sorts of things, right? So I know that there are extremes, but let's just leave the extremes out for now. Okay. I'm not denying that those things happen. Just like we can have these very extreme weather events that are out of the ordinary. But generally, okay, and I'm talking about what applies to the general population, the majority of people, is our experience is very similar to that of the weather. Now, as you understand how human beings work, so the psychological functioning of a human being, this is very important. You are not as frightened by that, whether that be your emotions or somebody else's. Now, just think about this for a second. If I'm not frightened of my emotional experience, and most people get very frightened. Now, I know this because I speak to people, lots of people. I'm lucky enough, fortunate enough, privileged enough to speak to a large number of people from all walks of life, from all over the world. And I don't say that to big note myself. I say that because it doesn't matter what country you are from or your culture or your background. These are commonalities amongst people. People have extreme emotional experiences. And then we judge ourselves or we judge another person for that. Because it's almost like we think we shouldn't be having that experience. But if you think about it, the nature of a human being is very similar to the nature of the weather. Okay. And so when you understand that, you understand the way the weather works, you're not so frightened, are you? Because you kind of go, oh well, if it's winter and it's hailing and you're having a really cold day, you just kind of go, oh yeah, it's a bit, maybe it's a bit colder than normal, maybe it's a bit more extreme, but it is winter. You kind of go, well, that's kind of the way winter works. And you would say the same thing about summer. Wow, it's really hot today. It's a bit hotter than normal, but hey, it is summer. So we're looking at the nature of something. And so when you look at the nature of something, you are a lot more understanding, accepting, you're less frightened by it. And when we're less frightened by something, what do we have access to? Right? Think about it. What do we have access to? When I'm not so frightened by my emotional experience or somebody else's emotional experience, what do I then get access to that I simply don't have access to when I'm frightened? Right? This is very, very, very important. Very important for our relationships, for communication, for connection, for well-being, for everything. Hey, Shani. Hi. Nice to see you, honey. Nice to see that there's someone listening to me on YouTube. Well, yes, that's true. You have access to rationality. And yes, Michelle, you have access to fresh new thinking. You have access to emotional and mental bandwidth. I cannot tell you how important this is. This is where we get the answers, guys, from having emotional and mental bandwidth, because we have room for insight. We have room. I'm up to the final chapter of my book. And before I'm about to submit it to be reviewed. So this is the first draft. So I'm at the final chapter of the first draft of my book, which has been a massive undertaking on my behalf, because writing is not something that comes easily to me. But it's something I've been wanting to do for such a long time. So I'm literally about to write that. Hopefully I'll get a chance to start that today. But I've just written a chapter about the power of insight. And so it's very, very fresh in my mind. And when we understand that, the power of insight, having a full, busy mind stops making sense. It becomes less and less acceptable, if that makes sense. It becomes like, I need emotional mental bandwidth so I can get the insights that I need. I need emotional and mental bandwidth so I can get clarity of mind, and then I can know what my next step is in regards to how I want to handle that conflict with someone, the decision that I want to make about anything, my job, work, children, parenting, all of it, what we're going to have for dinner. Clarity of mind is this powerful leverage that few people understand, few people draw on. And, when you do understand it, all of that thinking that we engage in, all of it that we get stuck in, the ruminating that we do, that then kind of limits our capacity for fresh thinking, emotional intelligence, insight, all of those things, playfulness, curiosity, understanding, compassion, the things that you need in a relationship, right? The things that create goodwill, the things that move the needle, the things that enable you to get over yourself. We don't have access to those things when we don't understand how things work, when we are in that fear-based response to how we are experiencing something, the emotion that we're in, or the emotion someone else is in. So there's just so much more on offer when you understand the way something works. So circling back to where I started this live today, and hello to everyone who's just joined us. Hi, Marae. Nice to see you, honey. Welcome. The reason I talk about the weather, okay, is because the weather is so similar to the way a human being works, to the way we all work. Okay, the weather is unpredictably predictable. Okay, winter follows autumn, or what do you guys call it? Fall. Some of you call it fall. Spring follows winter. Summer follows spring. Like there's a predictability to the unpredictable nature. And so as we understand this, we're not so frightened by those enormous storms that can happen, or when the temperature plummets, or when we get a big fall of snow, or any of those things. And when we're not so frightened, we've got the bandwidth to work with what is rather than against what is. This is so important. Okay. So there's always a reason why I'm talking about something, in case you think, why is she talking about this stuff? What has this got to do with anything? There's always a method to my madness, guys. I promise you. So let me get to the questions for today. There's a few here, so I'm going to get to these as quickly as I can. Okay, Facebook Live Friday. Sorry, guys. Here they are. All right. Okay, so first question for today. Hello, Fiona. I have many good friends that are in a good, healthy, long-term relationship with their partners. I really admire their relationship and how they live their life with good communication, understanding, and holding space for each other. I'm surrounded by these lovely people every week. Fantastic. Isn't it great to be surrounded by people who can show you what's possible in terms of how great a relationship can be, and how to show up and all of those things. My question is, I experience that I'm struggling to move on from my latest unhealthy relationship and open myself up to meeting someone new. It's like I compare everyone to my ex. I long for a healthy relationship, but I'm afraid to open myself up. Can you speak a little bit about how to open up to a new healthy relationship? Sure, absolutely. And this is a really great question. So, if you've someone who's been in a difficult relationship, or you've come out of a long-term relationship, or maybe that relationship didn't end so well, this really does cycle back to what I just said in terms of how similar the nature of a human being is to the weather. Okay. The greatest thing that you could ever do for yourself, and I really mean this, the greatest thing you could ever do for yourself is meet someone with a quiet, neutral frame of mind. This is so important, because see how this person was saying, "Oh, I find myself comparing myself to my ex. I find myself, thinking about that relationship. I find myself struggling to let go of it." So, are they showing up to anyone that they're dating or meeting? They're kind of like bringing the bruise of the past with them. Okay, they're bringing the bruise of the past with them, and they're bringing something that's happened, that's finished, that's done, that is no longer real in the now, but they're grabbing it and they're bringing it into the now and bringing it to life. Because we operate under this mistaken belief that if I focus on the past, I'm going to learn from my mistakes. Okay. Now, here's the thing that you need to understand: human beings learn via insight and fresh thinking. They learn via insight and fresh thinking. Now, if I have a deep faith and trust in that, then my need to cling on to the past and bring it into the now diminishes, right? I don't need that. If I know, and this is part of understanding the way human beings work, right? When you have a deep understanding of how human beings work, you trust in the things that I'm talking about very deeply, okay? You don't have a lot of yeah buts around them. Because some of you listening, which is fine, I understand, will have a lot of yeah buts around what I'm saying. But this is fun. This is so powerful, and I can say this because I've been teaching this for years and years and years, and I see this every day with my students in my relatable program, my clients, etc. When you understand how things work, you have a lot of faith and trust in that, and so in doing so, things like grabbing hold of the past and bringing it into the now no longer makes sense, because I don't need to learn from the past. I know that I will get fresh thinking. I know that I will get an insight. This is how change works, right? So I know this. So my need to hold on to that lessens considerably. Or if I do have thinking about that, it doesn't make sense to me. So the greatest thing I can do is be an empty vessel, because an empty vessel can be filled up with something that's fresh. An empty vessel, right? If your vessel is full, then you don't have access to that. You want to think of the past as, and really the past lies in our intellectual ego mind. You want to think about the past as like a Google search engine. To me, that's what Google is. Okay. The past and our personal intellectual thinking is full of everything that is already known, right? So the thing about Google is you type a question in Google, but you will only find the answer if someone else has already asked that question of Google, won't you? Right? That's the whole point of Google. Someone asks a question, Google retains the memory of that, and then someone else asks that question, and that the answer to someone else's question pops up, and you go, "Oh, cool." But the limitation of that is something that is unknown will not be found there. And as you've heard many people say, which is one of the more famous quotes of Albert Einstein, you can't solve something from the same level of thinking that created it. What we need is fresh thinking. And Albert Einstein understood this innately, which is why he was so fascinated in what was yet known. What was yet to be known, right? He was fascinated in the unknown and far more interested in that than what he was in what had already been discovered and known. To him, that didn't have meaning. The life, the magic was in the unknown. Okay, so you got to be able to show up to someone that you're meeting with an empty, neutral mind. And this is entirely possible, guys. I promise you it is. No matter what's happened in the past, This is something that is accessible to every human being on the planet, no exception, because the way we create our reality is the same. Now, I know people behave in different ways, right? So when I talk about people being similar, I'm not talking about their behavior. I'm talking about the way they generate their reality internally. This is the same for everyone, all right? And when we look in the direction of sameness, it's very calming. And so what I'd be saying to this person is, if you want to show up and put yourself out there and meet someone new, you've got to do so with a neutral frame of mind and just trust what shows up for you in that moment. You don't need to protect yourself. You don't need to be grabbing hold of the past. When we're in a neutral frame of mind, we are very open to wisdom. We're very open to fresh thinking. And remember, fresh thinking is loving and insightful by nature. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fresh. Okay. And so when we have a deep understanding of those things, it is easier and easier and easier to show up from that space and just see what happens. And when we are in that frame of mind, we're in a very loving frame of mind, a very open frame of mind, which is good for us and good for the people that we are sitting across from the table of. Because, I think a lot of people get really hung up when they're dating someone or they're in the dating scene and they've got a lot of criteria in their minds. Okay. And they're kind of cycling through that criteria. So their minds are not an empty vessel. Their minds are loaded. Their lives are busy. Their minds are full. Now, what happens when you sit across from someone with a loaded, busy mind is the other person can feel it. And so they start to feel a bit uneasy. They're not quite sure why. It doesn't quite feel as safe emotionally. And so then they start overthinking. And so what happens is you end up in a dating situation where you're not really seeing the best in what the other person has to offer and you're not bringing your best. Does that make sense? The insecurities and the frailties tend to creep in. So really being open to sitting down with a neutral, it being a neutral, empty vessel is the greatest thing you could do for yourself and for the other person. This is so, so, so important. So that's how I would, that's my response to that question. Next question. Hi, Fiona. A question I wanted to ask you. I haven't made formal contact regarding couples counselling as I'm concerned that me being the first point of contact potentially unbalances the future counselling relationships and could put my partner at a disadvantage and may make them unwilling to be involved. Is this a reasonable concern? Look, let me just address that for 1 second. Here's the thing, right? One of you has to reach out at some point. Someone has to start that process. And it's very common for one person to reach out to me and say, hey, Fiona, I want to know about your couples counseling. How does it work, et cetera, et cetera. And, for me personally, I would never work with a couple without meeting both parties first, because the way you set something up very much determines the success of it. Okay. The way you set something up very much determines the success of it. And so I would want both parties to have a chat with me, either separately or together, so that they have a chance to meet me, see if they feel comfortable with me, see if they feel like this is someone they can relate to, this is someone that could help them, and then it becomes a decision that you make together, right? But one of you's got to start the process. So one of you reaching out isn't going to undermine or undervalue anything, especially if you're giving the other person a chance to meet me or whoever and then see for themselves. What could undermine, in my opinion, the couples counseling process is if one of you reaches out, books an appointment, the couples counselor says, okay, great. And then all of a sudden you've got one person on the back foot because that person doesn't know what's being said. They haven't met their counselor first. They don't know. So they come to that initial meeting. And anyway, I don't work with people that way anyway. I start off with working with people individually, but I'm just talking most counselors have you both together. And so they then could potentially be on the back foot because it's like, okay, I don't know what my wife or my husband said. I don't know this person. I don't know how I feel about them. I don't know how it's going to work. They've got a lot of unanswered questions on their mind. They're not feeling too great and they're going to be in defense mode. And then if the counselor then was to kind of question that person, they could then feel like, oh, the counselor favors my wife or my husband because they spoke to them first, and then things can spiral. So this is why I always ensure I meet both people, even regardless of who's reached out to me first. That balances things beautifully and gives both people an opportunity to ask me questions, to, go through that process. So it could be together or it could be separately, but there's no harm in you reaching out, right? Not at all. Someone's got to start the process, okay? And I think it's great that you're taking some initiative, right? It's because it looks like, you know what I mean, you've thought about this and you're doing something about it. That's a good thing. It's just giving the other person a chance to have a chat and have their concerns met. So not at all. Anyway, I hope that helps. Okay, next question. Hi, Fiona. I was hoping you could provide some insights into the following questions in Friday's Q&A. What role does menopause play in relationship dynamics, especially in relationship to conflict? Well, it's like anything, okay? It's like anything. It has as much to do with the understanding of both parties. So, for example, I've had people, and I know, and look, there's so much more being talked about menopause now, thank goodness, because it needed to be. It's been this thing that I think women have been very unprepared for, and kind of walked into and just found their whole world changing, because it does. I mean, menopause is a really big deal for a woman to go through, really big deal. And there's more and more studies coming out around that. Okay. And so, which is fantastic, because there was very limited information, and a lot of women walking into menopause and not understanding what was happening to them and thinking there was something wrong with them. Okay. So, but women, there are degrees of experience around that. Some women breeze through menopause. Some women find it incredibly challenging. There's all of those things. However, I think the degree of difficulty that you go through as a couple depends on the level of understanding and goodwill that is in place. So if your wife is going through menopause and you're someone that, if it were me, so let me go back a step. If I was a man and my wife was going through menopause, or I'm a woman and I'm in a same-sex marriage, whatever, okay, and my partner's going through menopause, and I don't know anything about it, the first thing I would do is make sure that I would read about and find out and understand menopause, right? I think this is something not enough partners do, and that's on you to do. You want to understand, because remember, understanding is the gateway to everything. So you want to understand what your partner's going through. You want to understand what could be going on for them, because understanding generates empathy and compassion. And this is very important, because, if you're in a relationship with someone and you're going through menopause and they don't understand it, you can feel very alone, very disconnected. So someone who takes the time to read up about menopause, to learn about it, to find out about it, to understand it, to be able to then have a conversation with you about it, that will have the person who's going through menopause feel very seen, okay? Very seen. They'll feel like they matter. They'll feel heard. They'll feel understood. This is very, 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 very important. So when couples do that, the journey through menopause can be one where there's connection and understanding and patience, and it can just be the next step in your journey together through life. Now, when you have couples who don't do that, where the other party hasn't perhaps taken the time to understand where their partner's going through and what their partner's dealing with, this is where people become judgmental, they become impatient, they get frustrated, they take things personally, and we go into attack mode. And then the person who's experiencing menopause feels disconnected, alone, and misunderstood. So you want to check in with each other. You want to make sure goodwill is high, and you've got to lower your expectations when a female is going through menopause, because there are things going on that are outside of her control. And so if you go in with the same level of expectations, and this is why expectations is a bonus program in my Relatable, is a bonus program or module I offer in my Relatable program, because expectations really can be the killer of relationships. with understanding, then your expectations will shift and change. And so then instead of living in a constant feeling of disappointment and frustration, what's there is understanding, connection, and compassion. And that's just as much your responsibility if you're going through a big life change like that with your partner, just like you would need to bring that to the table if they're going through pregnancy and childbirth and everything that comes after that, because massive changes happening in a woman's body. Breastfeeding in of itself is utterly exhausting, so the more understanding you bring to that, then the greater level of connection and goodwill. So I think that's very important. All right. But yes, menopause can play a big role in a woman's libido, in her energy, in her memory for a period of time, in her sleep cycle. Like it is and can be a big deal. But with enough understanding, you have enough patience and all the things that come with that. And so you have a role in that as well. So I hope that helps with that. Now, the second thing, I smiled when I saw this. The question is, why do females, and I'm generalizing, I know, find it so hard to apologize? So let me just address that. Having difficulty with apologizing is not a female thing. It's a human being thing. I meet just as many men who struggle to apologize, or what I would call get over themselves, as I do women. This is not a female thing. So don't look at this as a gender thing, because when you look at it as a gender thing, what happens? I want you to think about this for a second. This is very important. Who wants to have a go at answering that? When you look at something in terms of gender, what happens? What happens? Anyone have a go at answering that, or responding to that? You look at things as a gender issue. What happens? The lady GA, the lady on with the dolphin profile on YouTube. Thank you. Amen. Yeah, you assign a certain meaning to it. Yeah, we definitely, Michelle. Yeah, we shift blame. Our backs get up. And what happens is we stop listening. We stop being curious because we go, "Oh, there we go. That's women for you." Right? See it? Hear it? Oh, that's women for you. Oh, that's what women do. Now, can you see it? Can you see how dismissive you become in your listening? Can you see how you just stop listening? Ugh, becomes like that, right? Yes, that's right, Susan. And it's like the person who is that gender is flawed. It's a very dangerous assumption to make and a very dangerous place to listen from. Oh, women have a problem with this. Oh, men have a problem with that. No, no, no. What happens when you do that is you stop being curious, you stop listening, you stop asking questions. And I'm telling you, listening issues are such a major problem. The chapter I've just finished writing. So I know I said earlier I'd just written a chapter on insight, which I had just earlier this week, but the chapter I just finished was on listening and the problem with it and the listening issues that I see in relationships. Yes, generalizations are dangerous, very dangerous. Hey, Brian. Hi, nice to see you. So this is why I don't talk about gender and gender differences, because people then label gender. Oh, that's because women do this. Oh, that's because men are like that. And they become dismissive and they stop listening. Now, when you stop listening, you break connection. All right. Now, I'm going to tell you, most people are pretty flawed listeners. They really are, because most people are listening through an assumption, they're listening through judgment, they're listening through self righteousness, blame, and they don't hear what's being said. Listening is an enormous problem. It really is. I need to run some listening masterclasses. I was thinking about that this morning when I was making breakfast. Going, I really need to do something about that. Anyway, so this is not a gender issue. It's not that women struggle to apologize. This is something that human beings struggle with. Now, imagine if you were to approach someone who's stuck, who's maybe said something they didn't mean, and unable to get past that in that moment. Now, if you apply judgment to them, nothing's going to shift, is it? But if you can get over yourself enough to bring compassion and understanding and curiosity, well, that just creates a whole different level of connection. So stay away from gender bias, please. Looking at differences doesn't help. It just creates more division. Okay. So I hope that helps. And thanks so much for asking those questions. That's really, really, like, truly, all of these things help all of us. Um, on so many levels. So whatever your questions are, I really, really appreciate it. And I appreciate the courage it takes to send a question in. So if you do have a question that you want me to answer, send it to hello@fionalukeis.com.au. I really need to receive them by Thursday, the day before, for me to get an opportunity for me to answer them the next day. So, and the best place to do that is via email. You can do that at any time, and they will just be my assistant then just kind of puts them in order of being received, and I just go through them one at a time each week as much as I can. Now, I just want to say one thing. I know that there are a lot of things out there that talk about what to do, how to do it, and when to do it, and give you a lot of steps around things. And just for those of you who are newer to my work, I don't give you steps. And there is a really big reason why I don't do it. Okay? Because I want you to get access to fresh thinking and insight. And when we're applying steps, we're in our logical, analytical brain. And in our logical, analytical brain, we don't get, or it's harder for us to get access to things like that, to the fresh thinking, to insight and realizations. It really is. And we get very rigid in our thinking. We get very stuck with our thinking. Our minds get kind of shrink and get smaller. Instead of expanding, we're doing this. And so you'll find in my ebook, you'll find with what I'm teaching you an understanding of how human beings work. Because when we look in the direction of understanding, our minds expand, our minds get quieter. We try things on. And then from there, there's so much more on offer in every aspect and area of your life. Okay? Steps tend to help our ego, but don't really help us expand and grow long term. Because a step, think about it like this, a step is kind of coming from someone else's insight rather than your own. And I'm more interested in you having an insight, okay, because that's what's going to have you feel empowered. And it's going to have you feel empowered long term, right? And that's what I want for you. Empowered human beings are kinder, more patient, loving, playful, curious. They really, really are. They're not operating from such a fear-based space where they feel like they've got to be defensive and defend themselves, or I just said the same thing, but defensive and convince someone else of their point of view so that they can feel okay, or people please, or rescue, or all of those things that we tend to do when we're operating out of fear. Okay, well, that's it for me today. I hope this has been helpful, guys. And if you want to know more about my Relatable program, or you want to find out about counseling, couples counseling, or my couples, the work that I do with couples, you're very welcome to book a complimentary chat with me here. And I can, that way we can meet each other and I can answer any questions that you have. Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Without a doubt, the ebook is amazing and everyone should read it. Beautiful place to start for anyone, no matter what life is sharing. Thank you, Brian. I so appreciate that. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Michelle. Take care, everybody, and I will see you next Friday. Okay. Have a great week. Ciao.